What happens if one of the calmest men in Hollywood decides the price of your lie is too big to forgive? Before the cameras turned on, the studio felt tight enough to snap. Piers Morgan sat behind his desk, hands folded over cue cards that had been rewritten 3 times that morning. He called this segment a truth talk, but everyone in the control room knew Piers wanted a fight. Denzel Washington knew it too. He sat still in his chair, eyes soft but steady, watching the producers fuss with lights they hoped would hide the sharp edge behind Piers's grin. The applause sign blinked on. The crowd clapped on cue, but you could feel it. They were not here for small talk. They were here to see if Denzel would finally crack. And behind that polite noise, Piers Morgan leaned forward, ready to push the line just far enough to feel real. Piers Morgan started with a grin wide enough to look friendly, but tight enough to feel like a trap. He flipped through his cue cards once, then tossed them aside like he was too honest to read from a script. The audience watched him lean in, voice dipping into that half-mock, half-charm tone he used when he wanted a headline that felt like a punch. Denzel, you're the good guy in every movie. The calm one. The wise one. But you and I both know that's just the role, right? Piers paused, letting the words sting just enough to wake the room up. So tell us, how long have you been faking it for the cameras? The crowd shifted. Denzel's eyes did not. And in that tiny flicker, everyone sensed Denzel Washington was not going to let this slide the way Piers expected. Denzel did not blink. He let the question sit between them like a glass about to crack. The audience held their breath. A polite laugh slipped out from somewhere in the back, but it died before it reached the stage lights. Piers Morgan leaned in, pushing his elbows onto the desk, eyes locked on Denzel, like he was waiting for the first crack to show. Come on, Denzel. The people deserve the truth. You've made millions playing saints. But you're not a saint, are you? Denzel's voice came out calm, so calm it made the air feel colder. You want to talk about the truth, Piers? Then stop pretending you care about it. A ripple moved through the crowd. Small, but real enough to make the grin on Piers's face twitch around the edges. He drummed his fingers on the glass, the sound tapping like a clock counting down the last moments before the room changed for good. You're dodging, Piers said. That's what you do. You stand on a stage, tell people what they want to hear, and when the mask slips, you run behind your PR team. You can't do that here. Denzel tilted his head. Just that. But it was enough to show he was not the one pinned to the table now. What exactly am I dodging? Your gossip? Your half-truths you buy from people who can't spell my name unless you write them a check. The audience laughed, but not for Piers. They laughed because they felt the shift. Because Denzel's calm did not crack. It hardened. Piers's grin faded for just a breath, then snapped back. You think you're untouchable, don't you? You think you can sue every reporter who writes something you don't like. Denzel's eyes stayed locked. His voice never rose. You don't get sued for writing something I don't like. You get sued for lying. And you're about to find out the difference. A gasp slipped through the front row. You could almost see the producer's hand waving off camera, the silent plea for Piers to steer it back before it snapped. But Piers Morgan was never good at turning around once he started a fight. So you're threatening me now? Piers laughed, but it sounded more like a cough. That's your big move? The great Denzel Washington, suing me on live TV? For what? Asking a question. Denzel leaned back just an inch, eyes steady, voice like glass cutting through the noise. Not for the question. For pretending you have an answer you bought from a liar and sold as the truth. The crowd fell dead quiet. Not a cough. Not a whisper. Just that tight, heavy silence that says someone in the room just realized they stepped too far. Piers opened his mouth, but Denzel kept going. You think that word, truth, belongs to you because you shout it louder than everyone else. But the truth is not something you buy in back rooms, Piers. It's something you live with when the cameras go dark. A slow, careful applause broke out. One person, then another, not wild, just honest. And in that moment, the grin slipped for good. And behind that calm, the look in Denzel's eyes said he was not bluffing. He was finished letting someone else name his story. Denzel's last words still hovered in the air like a slow echo that no one wanted to breathe too loud. Piers Morgan sat back, trying to mask the twitch in his jaw with another smirk, but the audience could see the slip. They could feel it. He drummed his fingers once on the edge of his desk like he might tap out a new rhythm strong enough to drown out what he had just heard. "All right, Denzel," Piers said, voice pitched sharp and bright as if sarcasm could still save him. "If you've got such a big problem with the media, maybe don't come on live TV. Or is this just your way of scaring everyone into silence?" Denzel did not smile. He did not blink. "I'm not here to scare anyone. I'm here to remind you there's a cost to lying. That's all." The audience leaned in, the hush so thick the cameras had to fight to catch it all. One of the producers mouthed something offstage, a frantic gesture for Piers to change the subject. But Piers could not back down now. Not with the lights on him. Not with the crowd watching to see if he would fold. "You think you're so righteous," Piers said. "You think you're the truth when all you've got is your lawyers and your image. That's it." Denzel's eyes flickered to the audience. He did not laugh. He just looked at them the way a father looks at a kid who already knows the answer but needs to hear it said out loud. "There's a difference between an image and a record. My record is clean. That's why you're the one sweating right now, not me." A low ripple, almost a laugh, moved through the front row. But no one clapped. It was not that kind of show anymore. Piers shifted in his seat, fingers tapping faster now. "You really think you can sue me for this? For a question?" Denzel's shoulders lowered, his voice a steady anchor in the bright noise. "Not for the question. For the story you've been pitching to every tabloid that would pay you for it. You didn't know I'd see the emails, did you?" Piers's smirk cracked, just once, like glass under too much heat. "Emails? What emails?" His laugh came out high, almost shrill. "That's a lie." Denzel did not lean in. He didn't need to. "You've got my people's number, Piers. Call them. Tell them you never shopped that story. See how fast the paperwork lands on your desk tomorrow morning." The audience gasped, quiet, but long enough to feel real. One woman near the back turned to her friend, wide-eyed. The cameras caught it. They caught everything. And for the first time all night, Piers Morgan looked like the only man in the room who wished the lights would shut off. Piers Morgan's fingers stilled on the desk like he was trying to press the whole moment flat beneath his palms. But the grin he forced back onto his face looked brittle now, stretched too thin to cover what everyone could see. The hush in the studio did not lift. It settled deeper, folding around every word that had yet to be spoken. Piers cleared his throat, voice scraping against the edges of his own bravado. "You can't sue a man for asking questions, Denzel. This is freedom of speech. This is what you signed up for when you sat in that chair." Denzel's laugh was small, warm, but it did not reach his eyes. "You know what's funny about freedom of speech, Piers? It protects you from prison. It doesn't protect you from the price of a lie." A few people in the audience breathed out, that low sound people make when they realize the argument is no longer a performance. It's real now. It costs something. Piers shifted again, that false charm slipping like a coat he could not keep on his shoulders. "I'm a journalist," he snapped. "It's my job to ask questions, to poke, to expose people who pretend they're untouchable." Denzel's eyes narrowed just slightly, the corners tightening like a man measuring whether he needed to swing or just stand. "And it's my job to remind you you're not above the truth. You're not above the law. And you're not above paying for the mess you make of people's names when you're desperate for the next headline." The host, somewhere off stage, coughed into her mic like she might drag the moment back to safety. But no one was listening to her now. The camera panned closer. Piers tried to hold Denzel's eyes, but something in him had already turned. "You think you're going to scare me out of doing my job?" Piers said, but the words came out thin. "You think a lawsuit's going to make me shut up?" Denzel tilted his head, that calm weight rolling back across the table. "No, Piers. I think a courtroom will do what the truth always does. It doesn't shut you up. It just shows people who you really are when the lights cut off." And in that stillness, everyone knew. This was not the line Piers Morgan had hoped to headline. This was the line that would follow him out the door. Piers Morgan shifted in his chair like he could shake the words off his shoulders, but they clung to him too tight. He glanced toward the producer's booth, hoping for a sign to pivot, to spin this back into a cheap sparring match. No hand came to save him. No cue card left to read. The hush in the audience was too thick to drown out now. He forced a laugh, brittle at the edges. So you're going to drag me into court for doing my job? You really think that makes you the hero, Denzel? You're going to look like every other pampered celebrity who can't take a few tough questions. Denzel did not move. He didn't need to. It's not a tough question, Piers. It's a fake answer. And you know it. Someone in the front row nodded. Small, but enough for Piers to see the room was tilting. He pressed his palms flat on the desk, knuckles whitening. The people want the truth. That's all I'm trying to get. They deserve to know if you're really the man you pretend to be. Denzel's voice stayed low, the quiet so heavy it made Piers's bravado sound like an echo bouncing off an empty wall. You don't want the truth. You want my name. You want my calm turned into your chaos so you can cut it up for clicks. But you forgot one thing, Piers. Piers's jaw twitched. And what's that? Denzel's eyes did not blink. You're not the only one who can show people what you really are. You want a stage? Fine. Let's stand on it in front of a judge who knows what evidence looks like. A gasp rippled through the audience. No longer shock, but recognition. They could see it now. The headlines would spin. The lawyers would argue. But the truth had already walked out of Denzel's mouth and settled right where Piers could never pry it loose. And somewhere in that silence, every person in that room understood who was holding the story now. Piers Morgan's hands hovered above the desk, fingers frozen like he could not decide whether to fold them or clench them into fists. His voice found a new edge, brittle, desperate, a sound that did not match the grin he tried to stitch back on his face. So you're serious? You'd really take this all the way? Drag me into court because you don't like what I asked? Denzel's head tilted just enough to feel like a hammer coming down without ever needing to raise his voice. You don't get sued for asking questions, Piers. You get sued for lying when you pretend the answer is yours to invent. The audience sat so still the lights above the stage hummed like static. A woman in the second row covered her mouth, eyes wide. Someone near the back whispered, but the words died in the hush before they reached the cameras. Piers cleared his throat, the sound rough, like it might scrape the spin back onto his tongue. It's freedom of the press, Denzel. People will see this for what it is. A big Hollywood name trying to silence real journalists. Denzel breathed out once, slow, so quiet it drew the crowd closer. Freedom of the press doesn't mean freedom from consequences. You stand behind that word like a shield you bought cheap. But the people at home, they know the difference. They know truth when they hear it. Piers's eyes darted to the side of the stage, but the producers were statues behind the glass. No one coming to break this up. No commercial break big enough to bury what had just been said. Denzel rested his hands on the desk, the weight of them heavier than the lights burning overhead. This is not about headlines, Piers. It's about the price of using someone's life as your playground. And in that stillness, the cameras caught the look on Piers Morgan's face. A flicker of fear dressed up as defiance that told everyone the truth had already slipped through the net. The cameras kept rolling even though the show was already over in every way that mattered. Piers Morgan sat rigid behind his desk, shoulders hunched like he might still find one more line sharp enough to cut the moment down to size. But the grin he forced back onto his face would not hold. The lights above him did not soften. They just made the sweat on his brow shimmer under the silence that Denzel Washington had wrapped around the whole room. A few people in the audience began to clap, but the sound was hesitant. Not for Piers, but for the man who had just reminded them what it looked like when dignity refused to sell itself for the price of a headline. Piers tried to salvage the moment, voice pitching higher, eyes flicking to the cameras like maybe the red light could spin the story back in his favor. You think you can scare me off, Denzel? Sue me all you want. The world will see it for what it is. Just another rich actor too fragile to handle the truth. Denzel's laugh was small, almost kind, but the weight in his words pressed every syllable into the glass desk between them. You keep saying truth like you own it, but you've never paid the cost of telling it. You've only ever sold it. No one in the front row blinked. They were holding their breath like the next word might knock the walls down. Piers opened his mouth again, but the fight had already left his eyes. Denzel stood up, not fast, not for drama, just steady enough to remind everyone who was really walking away with the final word. He looked out at the people who had come for a show and got something else instead. His voice when he spoke was so calm it felt like a promise no spin could drown. Say what you want, Piers. Twist it how you like. But from today on, every person who repeats your lie will pay the same price you will. He set the microphone down, the click of plastic against glass louder than Piers's half-formed comeback. The audience did not cheer. They just watched him go. A man who knew that sometimes the loudest noise is the silence you leave behind when you refuse to be anyone's story but your own. By the next morning, the clip was everywhere. Headlines tried to frame it as a meltdown, a threat, a desperate move by a fragile man. But every replay, every comment, every quiet share in a break room told the same truth. People did not see a meltdown. They saw a man who had held his calm like armor, while someone else tried to break him open for profit. Piers Morgan spent the next week spinning the moment as courageous journalism. But every time he spoke, Denzel's line echoed louder. You've never paid the cost of telling the truth. You've only ever sold it. And for millions of people, that one line was worth more than any headline Piers could ever write.